The Galactic Academy was a place where the universe's brightest minds and strongest bodies came to train. It was a school unlike any other, built on a foundation of power, discipline, and intelligence. Students from across the galaxy, each representing advanced civilizations and species, learned the art of war, strategy, and leadership. The best of the best came here, and only the strongest survived. At least that's what they told Olivia Bennett. Liv, as she liked to be called, was the only human cadet at the academy. Earth was still a young and developing world by galactic standards, often overlooked and underestimated by the powerful civilizations around her. Humans were considered primitive, their technology outdated, their species young and unpredictable. The thought that Earth could produce someone worthy of the academy had been laughable to many. But Liv had fought for this chance. She had fought her way through every obstacle, every trial, and now, here she was, a human cadet at one of the most prestigious schools in the galaxy. It hadn't been easy. In fact, it had been downright brutal. First day she'd arrived, Liv had felt the eyes of every alien in the room on her. She was different, smaller, slower, weaker. The alien cadets were towering figures with powers far beyond her own. The Zorkith, a race of muscular reptilian creatures, could lift twice their weight with ease. The Nexians, with their 6 arms and psychic abilities, could manipulate the environment around them without lifting a finger. And then there was Liv, a girl from a planet that was still learning how to reach the stars. But Liv had something they didn't. She had something they would never understand. She had heart. The first few weeks were hell. Every simulation, every physical test, every mental challenge, she had been the last to finish, the weakest on the field. She struggled in the war games, unable to match the speed or power of her opponents. In hand-to-hand combat, she had to rely on speed and technique to survive, but even that wasn't enough against the heavily muscled Zorkith cadets. And during class debates, her human perspective was often laughed at, her ideas dismissed as naive. But Liv didn't give up. She couldn't. Her home planet was counting on her. Earth had always been overlooked by the greater galaxy, and she would be the one to prove they weren't just a speck in the cosmos. Today was another test. The cadets were lined up on the field for the daily combat exercises. The instructors, alien warriors who had seen countless battles and been through more than any human could ever imagine, paced in front of the students. The sun, an unfamiliar bright orb in the alien sky, beat down mercilessly on the training grounds, casting long shadows across the sand. Liv wiped the sweat from her brow and squared her shoulders. The exercise today was simple in theory, a one-on-one combat trial against another cadet, using mock weapons and physical prowess. She had done well in the previous rounds, but this time it was different. This time she was up against Khazar, one of the most talented cadets at the academy, a Zorkith. Khazar was everything Liv was not. He was fast, strong, and had the confidence of someone who knew they were unbeatable. His scales glistened in the sunlight, his muscles rippling as he stepped forward, ready for the challenge. Liv could feel the weight of the expectation pressing down on her. The other cadets gathered around, murmuring to each other. Liv could hear their whispers, their doubts. "Do you think she has a chance?" "She's human, Khazar will crush her." "Poor girl, I bet she doesn't even know how to fight." Liv clenched her fists. She could hear them, feel their eyes, but she refused to let it break her. They thought she couldn't do it because she was human, but they didn't know her. They didn't know how far she was willing to go. The instructor's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs. "Cadet Bennett, Cadet Khazar, prepare yourselves." Liv took her stance, her body tense but steady. She wasn't fast enough to dodge Khazar's blows, but she could outsmart him. She had to be smarter. She had to think of a way to turn his strength against him. Khazar raised his mock sword, a blade that shimmered in the sunlight. He looked at Liv with a smirk, his sharp teeth glinting. "This will be quick," he said, his voice low and menacing. Liv didn't respond. She didn't need to. She focused on the fight ahead, blocking out the noise of the crowd, the whispers of doubt. It was just her and Khazar. No one else mattered. The signal was given, and Khazar charged. His movements were lightning fast, his sword slashing through the air with deadly precision. Liv barely managed to sidestep the first blow, the wind from the blade brushing against her cheek. She dodged again, this time using her smaller frame to her advantage, but Khazar's attacks were relentless. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the pressure of the fight closing in. She wasn't fast enough. She wasn't strong enough. She could hear the snickers of the other cadets as they watched her struggle. Khazar wasn't even breaking a sweat. But Liv wasn't finished yet. She wasn't going to quit. In a split second, Liv ducked beneath Khazar's next swing, rolling to the side. He followed her movement, thinking she was trying to escape, but it was a trap. Liv grabbed a piece of debris from the training grounds, an old shield that had been left behind by another cadet, and used it as a makeshift weapon. Khazar didn't expect it. She swung the shield with all her might, catching him off guard. The shield struck his side with a satisfying crack, sending him stumbling backward. He growled in frustration, but Liv didn't give him a chance to recover. She pressed forward, using the shield to block his next swing, then sweeping his legs out from under him with a quick, calculated kick. Khazar hit the ground hard, his sword flying from his grasp. Liv stood over him, her chest heaving, the shield raised high. The arena was silent. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The other cadets who had once written her off now stared at her in stunned silence. Khazar, the strongest cadet in the academy, was on the ground, and it was a human who had brought him down. Liv's heart hammered in her chest, but her voice was steady. "You're right," she said, breathing heavily. "This was quick." The instructor stepped forward, his voice filled with a rare admiration. "Cadet Bennett, you have exceeded expectations today. You've proven that strength alone is not enough. It's intelligence, it's heart, and you have both." Liv didn't smile. She didn't need to. The victory wasn't just for her, it was for Earth, for humanity, for every time someone had doubted her because she was human. She had proven them wrong, and she would keep proving them wrong again and again. Liv stood over Khazar, breathing hard, her chest rising and falling with each breath. The arena was still, the stunned silence hanging in the air like a thick fog. She could feel every eye in the place on her. The other cadets, once so certain she'd fail, were now watching her with wide eyes, disbelief etched across their faces. Even Khazar, the mighty Zorkith, lay defeated at her feet. She didn't let herself savor the moment. Liv knew better than to let pride take over. She had worked too hard to be distracted now. The instructor, a tall, narrow-eyed Nexian with 3 arms and a perfectly calm demeanor, stepped forward. He was the highest-ranking officer in the academy, and by many accounts, one of the most feared. "Cadet Bennett," he said, his voice cool and controlled. "You've impressed us today. You've proven something, but this is just the beginning. You'll need to prove yourself many more times before you're truly accepted here." Liv's heart pounded in her chest, but she nodded. She wasn't afraid of hard work. It was all she had ever known. She had barely caught her breath before she heard the voice behind her. It was low, commanding, and filled with authority. "Cadet Bennett, I need to speak with you now." Liv turned, her muscles still sore from the fight, her body aching, but the voice sent a chill down her spine. The speaker was someone she had heard about but never met, the commander himself. The Nexian instructor stepped aside without hesitation, and the tall figure of the commander strode into the arena. His 6 arms moved with ease, his towering presence almost overwhelming. He had an air of absolute power that made even the bravest cadets take a step back. His eyes locked onto Liv, with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "You've been making quite the impression, Earthborn," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You're different, stronger, smarter. I've been watching you for some time now." Liv stood tall, meeting his gaze, even as her nerves screamed at her to back down. "I'm just doing what I can, sir," she replied, keeping her tone steady, "trying to earn my place here." The commander nodded, his expression unreadable. "You've earned something, all right, but the question is, what?" Liv's breath caught in her throat. Something was off. His words weren't kind, not the way she had hoped they'd be. He wasn't here to praise her. No, this felt like something else, something more dangerous. She could feel the weight of his presence pressing in on her, making her feel smaller than she was. Before she could speak again, the commander turned his back and motioned for her to follow. "Come with me, Bennett. We need to talk." Air in the room felt heavy, suffocating even, as the commander's eyes never left Liv. His 6 arms, usually a symbol of superiority, hung by his side, but Liv knew it wasn't the physical power she needed to worry about. It was the calculated coldness in his stare. He was sizing her up, deciding what to do with her now that she had defied expectations. Liv's heartbeat thundered in her chest, but she refused to show any weakness. She had faced battles before, just not quite like this. She had proven herself on the training field, in simulations, and in every class she could. But this was different. The commander wasn't interested in her performance in combat. No, he was concerned with something much deeper. Her very presence here was a challenge to everything he believed. "You are a human," the commander said, his voice like a razor, sharp and cutting through the tension in the room. A species no one respects, and yet you've somehow made it this far, winning against cadets who have trained their entire lives. You're unpredictable. Liv stood silently, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She didn't want to show fear, but it was hard not to feel it. These aliens, these beings from far older civilizations, had everything in their favor: power, intelligence, centuries of experience. What did she have? Just a stubborn will and a body that ached every time she pushed it past its limits. "I'm not a mistake," Liv finally said, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions inside her. "I belong here just as much as anyone." The commander's lips curled into a faint smile that sent a chill down Liv's spine. "You say that now, but this is where the problem lies, Bennett. You don't belong here. You are not meant to be part of this academy. And as long as you are here, you are a risk to everything we've worked for." Before Liv could speak again, the other officers around the table began murmuring to one another. They were all watching her closely, but Liv focused on the commander. He was the one calling the shots here. His word was law, and it was clear she had no place in his plans. "Eliminate the variable," the commander muttered almost to himself. Then his voice rang out clearly for all to hear. "That is the only way to maintain order." The statement hit Liv like a slap. Eliminate. She didn't need to be told what that meant. They were going to get rid of her. For a moment, her mind raced with the reality of it. She was standing in front of the most powerful beings she had ever encountered, and they had already decided her fate. But something inside her snapped. She wasn't going down that easily. She wasn't going to let them think they could crush her spirit just because they were stronger or older. She was human. She was more than they thought she was. With all the courage she could muster, she took a step forward. "If you think that will solve your problem, you're wrong. I'm not going anywhere. I came here to prove that humans belong in the galaxy just as much as anyone else. You want to eliminate me because I challenge everything you believe. Fine, but you'll have to kill me first." The room went still, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The other officers watched her closely, but the commander didn't flinch. He seemed to be calculating, deciding if her defiance was something to be respected or destroyed. "Bold words for someone who doesn't understand the consequences of defiance," the commander said, his voice darkening. "But it doesn't matter. I've made my decision." Liv's mind raced. She couldn't be eliminated like this, not for standing up for herself, not for showing the galaxy that humans had the heart and strength to survive. She had come too far to give up now. If this was the end of her time at the academy, then she would make sure it wasn't just a quiet exit. She would go down fighting, showing them all what it meant to be human. Before anyone could make a move, Liv acted. She wasn't going to wait to be attacked. She had been trained for this moment, and now was the time to use every skill she had. In a blur of motion, she dashed toward the table, reaching for the weapon stored behind it. The officers around her barely had time to react as she grabbed a blaster and turned it on the closest officer. A tall, armored being with 4 arms, each ending in sharp, metallic claws. The blaster fired with a sharp crack, hitting him in the chest. The officer staggered back, shocked by the attack. But before Liv could take another step, a beam of energy shot past her, grazing her side. She hissed in pain, but her resolve only strengthened. They were coming for her, but she was ready. With a quick glance, Liv saw her path. The data systems on the far wall. If she could just reach them, she could disable the facility's defenses, lock down the room, and buy herself time. Time to escape. Time to show them that no matter how powerful they were, they would not win. She ducked behind the table, avoiding another shot from one of the officers. The adrenaline coursed through her, and she moved faster, pushing past the pain in her side. She could feel the blood trickling down her body, but she ignored it. She had a job to do. Liv ran toward the data systems, barely dodging a heavy blast from one of the officers. Her hand reached for the console, her fingers flying over the keys. The systems were encrypted, but Liv had learned how to crack difficult codes back on Earth. She was quick, and within moments she had gained access. The room shook as alarms blared. She had activated the facility lockdown, sealing every entrance, every exit. The commander and his squad couldn't escape. Liv had bought herself a few precious minutes, but that wasn't enough. She needed to finish this. As the squad moved to attack, Liv turned to face them. "You want to kill me? You're going to have to do more than that." Her voice was calm, defiant. Her hand tightened around the blaster as she prepared for the next move. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't backing down. She had fought her way here, and she wasn't going to stop now. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Liv felt in control. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. She fired again. The shot rang out, striking one of the officers in the shoulder, knocking him to the ground. The others hesitated. Liv could see the doubt in their eyes. She had made them question their belief in their superiority. Liv didn't give them a chance to recover. With a swift, calculated move, she advanced, taking down each officer one by one. The Academy had underestimated her from the beginning, but now she was proving that humanity wasn't just a species to be overlooked. And with each blow she struck, she knew the galaxy would never forget the name of the Earthborn girl who fought against overwhelming odds and won. The room was chaos. Alarms blared overhead, flashing lights turning the walls into a pulsing nightmare of red. Liv's heart raced as she crouched behind the data console, the sound of heavy footsteps and shouts echoing all around her. Her side ached, the wound from the earlier shot now a constant, painful reminder that time was running out. But she couldn't afford to focus on the pain. She had a mission. She had locked down the entire facility, but that was only a temporary fix. The squad was trying to override the security system, and once they did, they'd be back on her. And this time, they wouldn't hesitate. Liv gritted her teeth. She had no intention of giving them the chance to find her to end her life or her mission. She was here to prove something, not just to the commander and his squad, but to herself. She had worked her entire life for this. She wasn't going to let it end here, not like this. Her fingers flew over the console's controls, inputting commands at lightning speed. Sweat stung her eyes, but she didn't blink. She had already disabled their weapons systems, but there was more to do. She needed to get the Academy's core systems under her control. If she could cut them off from the outside world, they would be trapped. She had no time to waste. The door to the data room suddenly slammed open, and Liv spun around, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. Standing there, framed by the door, was the commander, flanked by the remaining members of his squad. They were angry. Their eyes burned with frustration and malice, but there was something else in them too, something that almost looked like respect. "Well done, Bennett," the commander said, his voice low and mocking. "You've managed to lock us in for now, but it's not enough. You can't stop what's coming." Liv didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her fingers continued to move over the controls, her mind racing. She knew what was coming. The Academy would send reinforcements. They wouldn't let her win this. They couldn't. She was human, and humanity wasn't supposed to win this kind of fight. She wasn't supposed to be here. But she was, and that made all the difference. The squad began to spread out, taking positions, blocking every possible escape route. The commander stood in front of her, his 6 arms crossed over his chest. There was no fear in his eyes, only cold calculation. "You can't hide from us forever," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've made your stand, you've been impressive, I'll give you that, but it ends here." Liv's hands shook as she continued to type, her thoughts spinning. She was running out of time. They were closing in on her. But she couldn't stop. Not now, not when she was so close. She glanced up briefly and locked eyes with the commander. "You think this is over? You think because you've surrounded me, you've won? I'm not like the others. You don't get to decide when I stop fighting." The commander smirked, a cruel, twisted smile. "You've proven yourself, Bennett, but now you'll learn why humans don't belong in places like this." Before Liv could react, one of the aliens lunged toward her, his 4 arms moving with frightening speed. She barely managed to dodge, but the blow still grazed her shoulder. Pain flared through her body, and she stumbled back, almost losing her balance. She had to move faster. She couldn't afford to be caught. If they got too close, it was over. Thinking quickly, Liv spun around, grabbing a metal rod from a nearby piece of equipment. She swung it at the approaching alien with all the strength she could muster, hitting him square in the chest. He staggered back, momentarily stunned, but not for long. He recovered quickly, his alien eyes narrowing with fury. Liv couldn't stop. She couldn't let him or the others corner her. She fired a shot from the blaster she'd grabbed earlier, hitting the wall near their feet. The blast was enough to momentarily disorient them, but the squad didn't back down. They were relentless. The commander stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice cold. "You're not going to win this fight, Bennett," he said, his tone final. "You don't have the power, the resources, or the backup." Liv's heart raced as she realized just how right he was. She was one cadet against an entire squad, an entire system that was designed to crush her. But something inside her shifted. She wasn't going to quit. She couldn't. She had something they didn't have, humanity. She had a heart that refused to give up no matter the odds. With a final burst of energy, Liv dashed toward the central console, slamming her hand onto the override panel. She wasn't going to rely on just weapons and systems. She had to outsmart them. She had to use every advantage she had left. As her hand hit the panel, the screen blinked to life. A countdown appeared on the terminal, 15 seconds. She had locked them in, but now she was going to make sure they couldn't get out. She was going to finish what she started. Liv stood, facing the squad, her back to the terminal, ready for the fight that was about to come. The countdown clock was ticking. She had 15 seconds to get out of here, 15 seconds before everything was over. The commander saw the countdown and cursed under his breath. "You're not getting away with this, Bennett," he snarled. But Liv wasn't listening to him. She was focused. She was fighting for something bigger than herself, for her planet, for every person who had ever been told they weren't good enough. She was human, and no one was going to take that away from her. As the seconds ticked down, the tension in the room reached a boiling point. The squad moved in, but Liv was faster. She dove toward the nearest exit, firing one last shot to keep them at bay. The door slammed open just as the countdown hit 0. The blast from the system overload rang out, and the room shook as the facility's defenses shut down. The emergency lights flickered as the entire building's systems powered down. The squad was trapped. They couldn't escape. Liv stood in the doorway, breathless, her body trembling but victorious. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time since she'd arrived at the academy, she felt like she had control. The commander stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This isn't over, Cadet Bennett. You can't win this." Liv raised her chin, her voice steady. "I already have." And with that, she turned and disappeared into the darkness of the corridors, leaving the commander and his squad behind. Liv's breath came in sharp gasps as she sprinted down the darkened corridor. Her body screamed in pain, every muscle feeling like it was made of lead. Blood from her side stained her uniform, but she pushed through it. She couldn't afford to stop. The Academy had never believed in her, and now they were going to see that humans, she were not to be underestimated. The corridors seemed endless, twisting and turning, but Liv kept running, her mind focused. The countdown had reached 0, and she had triggered the facility-wide lockdown, trapping the commander and his squad. But they wouldn't stay down for long. She knew that. The Academy was a fortress, an impenetrable structure built to control and dominate, and she had just made a mess of it. She had no illusions. She was just one human cadet, injured, alone, and fighting against forces far stronger and older than her. But in that moment, she didn't feel weak. She felt more alive than ever. She had a purpose, something deeper than survival. She was fighting for humanity's place in a galaxy that didn't want them there, for a species that had been dismissed as nothing more than a footnote in the history of the stars. She had to keep moving. Her mind raced with calculations. The only way out was to disable the central control room, the heart of the Academy's systems. If she could shut it down completely, they wouldn't be able to stop her escape, or worse, send reinforcements after her. But she didn't have much time. The lockdown wouldn't last long, and the commander would be furious. As she rounded the corner, Liv's sharp eyes caught sight of a maintenance hatch on the wall. It was small, hidden beneath a metal panel. She passed it earlier in the day, but hadn't thought much of it. Now it was her only chance. She darted toward it, her hands trembling with exhaustion as she pried open the hatch. Inside was a small control panel, just enough to access the building's communications and power grid. With a steadying breath, Liv plugged in a small data chip she had kept hidden in her pocket. It was a tool she'd stolen from the Academy's tech lab earlier, and now it was her only hope. She was good with tech, especially hacking into systems no one thought humans could access. Her fingers danced over the controls as she worked quickly, bypassing security protocols and manually cutting off the facility's backup systems. The screen flickered, and for a moment Liv thought it might have been a mistake. But then a wave of relief washed over her as the terminal confirmed her actions. The systems were offline. The Academy's records were being wiped. She had done it. The door to the central control room was now sealed shut. No one could trace her, no one could send reinforcements. She was free. But the job wasn't over. She had to escape before they regained control. As she turned to leave the maintenance shaft, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. Heavy, deliberate, the pounding of boots on metal. The squad was here. They had broken free from the lockdown, and they were coming for her. Liv's heart raced. She wasn't ready to face them again, not this soon. She had to think fast. She didn't have time to run. They would catch her. The hatch slammed shut behind her, sealing her inside. She was trapped. For a moment, she allowed herself a breath, her mind racing to find a way out. She couldn't let them win, not after everything she had done. Suddenly, the lights in the corridor flickered. A burst of energy from one of the squad members' weapons echoed through the hall. They had already found her, and they weren't going to give up. Liv's fingers reached instinctively for the blaster holstered at her side. But it was too far away. She had to rely on something else, something stronger. With an instinct born from sheer will, she charged forward, running straight at the squad. Her hand grabbed a piece of debris, metal and concrete, broken from the explosion earlier. Without thinking, she swung it at the nearest officer, a hulking Zorkith who had been the first to break through the security lockdown. The hit wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The alien stumbled back, caught off guard by the sheer force of her strike. Liv pressed her advantage, quickly maneuvering behind him to land another blow, this time across his back. He roared in pain, but Liv didn't stop. She kicked him hard in the knee, and he crumpled to the ground, his body losing the balance that made him so dangerous. The squad hesitated for a split second, thrown off by the unexpected turn of events. That was all she needed. Liv sprinted past the fallen alien, darting down the corridor. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Every second counted now. But just as she reached the end of the hall, the commander appeared. His massive form blocked her path, his eyes glowing with rage. The six-armed alien stood like a wall, unmoving, a threat in every line of his body. "Where do you think you're going, Bennett?" His voice echoed with venom. Liv's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. She stood tall even as her body screamed at her to run. She couldn't back down now. "I'm going to show you," she said, her voice steady, "that humans aren't as weak as you think." The commander sneered, his body tense as he took a step forward. He didn't even need his weapons. His raw strength was more than enough to crush her. Liv had only one shot. She wasn't going to fight him head-on. She wasn't strong enough. But she could use his overconfidence against him. She darted to the side, faking a move in one direction before sliding into a maintenance shaft to her left. She could hear the commander's roar of frustration behind her, but she was already gone, deeper into the maze of the academy. The squad was close now, but Liv wasn't stopping. She raced through the narrow tunnels, twisting and turning, her mind focused on nothing but escape. She couldn't let them catch her. She couldn't let them erase everything she had just fought for. Finally, she reached the exit. The academy's outer walls loomed before her. It was a jump, a leap of faith, but Liv didn't hesitate. She climbed the maintenance ladders, her hands shaking but her resolve unwavering. The outside world greeted her with the cold, unfamiliar wind of the planet's surface. Liv stood on the ledge, the building behind her dark and looming. She had made it. The academy couldn't control her anymore. She had erased their records, defeated their squad, and lived to tell the tale. Liv Bennett wasn't just a cadet. She was a symbol, and the galaxy would never forget the Earthborn girl who eliminated a squad and walked away from the Academy's most powerful beings. For the first time, she felt the weight of her humanity, not as a disadvantage, but as her greatest strength. She had shown them all. Humans were not weak. They were unstoppable. Liv stood at the edge of the Academy's outer walls, the cool wind whipping through her hair, the vast sky stretching out in front of her. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but she didn't pause to rest. She had no time for that, not now. She had done it, erased the records, outsmarted the squad, and made it out alive. But even as she looked out at the distant horizon, a sense of unease gnawed at her. The escape wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Behind her, the Academy's imposing structure loomed, dark and foreboding, a silent giant. She had been a part of that system, a mere cadet, insignificant. But now she had become a problem for them, a human who wouldn't play by their rules. The planet below her was alien, harsh, and unforgiving, and she was alone. There was no one to trust, no one to turn to. The galaxy wasn't ready for someone like her. Humans were still seen as weak, expendable, but Liv had proven that she wasn't weak. She wasn't anyone's punching bag. And she wasn't going to let them erase everything she had worked for. Liv's hands shook as she pulled herself away from the edge of the building, stepping back into the shadows of the campus. The streets outside were deserted, and the eerie silence of the night weighed on her. No one was around. Not yet. She needed a plan. She needed to get off this planet before the Academy sent reinforcements. She had no allies here, no backup, only the knowledge that she had to survive. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for humanity. She knew she had made enemies, serious enemies, The commander and his squad would not forget her. The higher-ups at the academy would be out for her blood, but they weren't going to find her that easily, not if she could help it. Her fingers clenched into fists, the frustration building within her. But then a thought struck her. She needed help, not from the academy, not from anyone here, but from the one thing the academy had never expected. Her mind flashed back to Earth, her home, the place she had left behind. Earth had always been underestimated by the galaxy, seen as a backwater world with no place among the stars. But she knew something that the galaxy didn't. Humans had something that no one else had. They had heart, and Liv wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. The next few hours were a blur of quick decisions and tense moments. Liv moved through the shadows of the academy streets, avoiding patrols and staying out of sight. She had learned quickly how to navigate this alien world, using the environment to her advantage. Her small frame helped her blend in, and her training had made her quick and quiet. Her eyes darted around, constantly scanning for any sign of danger. She couldn't afford to get caught, not now. The plan was simple. She needed a ship, a way off this planet. If she could get to one of the docking stations, she might be able to find a transport, something that could take her to a remote part of the galaxy where the Academy's reach couldn't touch her. Liv reached the docking bay in the dead of night. The bay was smaller than she expected, tucked away behind a series of warehouses and maintenance buildings. There were only a few ships parked in the corner, mostly small freighters and transports. She didn't have much time to waste. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted an old cargo ship at the far end of the bay. It wasn't much, but it was her best shot. She started moving toward it, her footsteps soft against the ground. The ship was old, but it was still operational. She could make it work. As she approached, her fingers brushed over the lockpad and she began hacking the controls. She was no expert with alien tech, but she had learned enough to get by. The ship's systems came to life, its engines humming softly as the door opened with a metallic hiss. Liv exhaled in relief and climbed aboard. The ship was dimly lit inside, a bit worn down, but it would get her where she needed to go. She sat in the pilot's seat, her hands shaking as she set the coordinates. The ship's engine sputtered to life, and Liv's heart raced with anticipation. She was almost free. But just as she began the takeoff sequence, a voice interrupted her. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Liv's heart stopped. The voice was low, calm, but laced with an unmistakable authority. She turned quickly, her eyes narrowing as she saw the figure step out from the shadows. It was a woman, alien but not one of the soldiers who had been after her. She was tall, slender, with pale skin and dark hair. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. There was something familiar about her presence, something that didn't quite sit right. Liv immediately reached for her blaster, but the woman raised her hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not here to hurt you," the woman said, her voice soft. "But if you want to escape, you'll need help. You can't do this alone." Liv hesitated. She didn't trust anyone, especially not now. The last thing she wanted was to get tangled up with another unknown player, but there was something in the woman's eyes that made her pause. "You're running from the academy," the woman continued, stepping closer. "They'll be looking for you soon. You won't get far on your own." "How do you know all this?" Liv asked, her voice tight. She couldn't afford to trust anyone, not yet. The woman smiled faintly. "I have my sources, and I know what the Academy is capable of. I also know that Earth doesn't belong under their control, but you've proven that humanity has a place here. I want to help you. You're not the first to fight back." Liv's mind raced. The woman's words were too perfect, too calculated. But still, Liv didn't feel the immediate threat she had with the Academy's officers. She could feel it in her gut. She was being offered an opportunity. And Liv wasn't the type to back down from opportunities. "Why should I trust you?" Liv asked, still skeptical. "Because I'm not your enemy," the woman said softly. "I'm someone who believes in the same thing you do, that humanity deserves a place in this galaxy. I'm offering you a way out, but you have to make the choice." Liv looked at the woman for a long moment, weighing her options. She had nothing left to lose. The Academy would never let her go, not now, and if she didn't act, she would be erased. She didn't have to trust the woman fully, but she did know one thing. She was human, and she wasn't going to let anyone decide her fate. With a deep breath, Liv nodded. "All right, I'll take your help, but I'm doing this my way." The woman smiled. "Good, you're exactly what humanity needs." Liv sat back down in the pilot's seat, her fingers once again dancing over the controls. This time she wasn't alone, and this time she was going to show the galaxy that humanity had a place. No one, no alien was going to erase them, not on her watch. The ship lifted off, soaring into the star-filled sky. Liv had no idea where her journey would take her next, but she knew one thing: she was just getting started. The cold emptiness of space stretched out in every direction, a sea of stars that seemed so far away, so unreachable. But for Liv Bennett, the vastness of the galaxy no longer seemed as intimidating as it once had. She wasn't just running anymore. She wasn't just surviving. She was in control of her future. The cargo ship hummed steadily beneath her, the flickering dashboard lights casting a faint glow over her face as she sat in the pilot's seat, her hands firm on the controls. The woman, who had introduced herself as Mara, sat beside her, quiet but watchful, as if waiting for Liv to make the next move. Liv had learned enough to know that Mara wasn't the kind of person who gave away her trust easily. But right now, that didn't matter. Liv had her own mission: prove that humanity was more than just a passing, insignificant species. She had done that when she defeated the commander's squad, and she had erased the Academy's records, showing them that no one could simply wipe Earth away. But there was more to do. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. "Where are we headed?" Liv asked, her voice steady, despite the weariness in her body. Her muscles still ached from the previous fight, and her side throbbed where the blaster wound had grazed her, but she couldn't stop now. There was no time to rest. Mara turned toward her, a calm expression on her face. "To a place where they won't find you, a place where you can disappear for good." Liv raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll just let me slip away like that? The Academy won't stop until they find me." Mara gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The Academy is powerful, yes, but it's not invincible. There are places, hidden places, where they won't reach you, but you have to trust me. This is the only way." Trust, Liv didn't give it easily, not anymore. She had learned the hard way that trust wasn't something you gave freely, especially not when you were running for your life. But Mara had helped her escape. She had led her to this ship when Liv had no other options, and for that, Liv was willing to give her a chance. "Fine," Liv said, her eyes narrowing with determination. "But if this is some trap—" "It's not," Mara interrupted, her voice firm but reassuring. "I'm here to help you. We have a common enemy." Liv studied her for a moment, trying to gauge her sincerity, but it was hard to tell. Mara was good at keeping her emotions hidden, a trait Liv had come to recognize in anyone who had been through as much as she had. The Academy wasn't the only dangerous thing out there, and Mara clearly knew how to navigate a world full of dangerous people. Liv leaned back in her seat, the stars beyond the window swirling as the ship accelerated. She was heading into the unknown, but for the first time in her life she felt a sense of purpose, a sense of hope. She was no longer a cadet fighting for her place among the stars. She was a survivor, and she was ready to make her own future. The journey was long and quiet. Liv and Mara didn't speak much, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. Mara was taking Liv to a hidden base, a place far enough out of the reach of the Academy. They would be safe, at least for a while. As they drifted further from the Academy's systems, Liv couldn't help but think about everything she had left behind. The Academy, the cadets, the commander. She had left all of them behind, but she knew that the battle wasn't truly over. The Academy would come for her. They would send forces to hunt her down, to erase the evidence of her existence, just as they had done with so many before her. But Liv wasn't going to let that happen. She had proven herself once. She would prove herself again. "What happens when we get to this base?" Liv asked, breaking the silence. "What's next?" Mara's gaze flickered toward her, her expression unreadable. "We'll regroup, you'll train, and then we'll figure out the next step." "Training?" Liv frowned. "I've already trained. I'm not interested in hiding forever." "No one said anything about hiding forever," Mara replied, a faint smile on her lips. "We need to build a movement. The Academy isn't just about power and control. It's about knowledge, and we need to take that knowledge back. But we can't do it alone. You've already shown you're capable of more than just surviving. Now we need to build something that will last." Liv's pulse quickened as Mara's words sank in. A movement. It sounded like a dream. But it was also a challenge, something bigger than herself, something bigger than Earth. If they could take the fight to the Academy, they could change everything. The idea was bold, audacious even. But Liv was done with playing small. She had fought her way through the Academy, fought against every expectation, and she wasn't about to stop now. She was human. And humanity had a right to stand alongside the other species in the galaxy, to have a voice, a place, and a future. It was a few days before they reached the hidden base. Liv had barely slept, her mind constantly spinning with everything that had happened, everything she had learned about the Academy and the challenges ahead. She knew that what Mara had said was true. The Academy wasn't just about fighting and winning battles. It was about control and knowledge. They had the power to manipulate entire systems, entire planets. But if Liv could break through that control, she could change everything. As the ship touched down on the base, Liv stepped out, taking in the sight of a vast, hidden compound built into the side of a mountain. It was surrounded by a thick forest, isolated from the rest of the world. The base was small, but it was a place of refuge, a place where she could regroup, heal, and plan her next move. "You'll be safe here," Mara said, leading Liv inside. "But only for a while. They won't stop looking for you." Liv nodded, her mind already racing with plans. She had survived the Academy. She had made it out alive, but this was just the beginning. She wasn't going to stop until humanity had its place in the galaxy. She had proven that she was strong, but now she had to prove that humanity was strong enough to fight back. And Liv Bennett, Earthborn Cadet, was ready to lead that fight. The next few weeks were filled with intense training and preparation. Mara taught her new techniques, ways to hack into systems, how to gather intel, how to fight smarter, not just harder. Liv learned quickly, and soon she was more than just a survivor. She was becoming a leader. The base became a place of refuge for others, humans and aliens who had been oppressed by the Academy's reach. Slowly but surely, the movement began to grow. Word spread, and more people joined their cause. And Liv, she was no longer just a cadet from Earth. She was a symbol of resistance, of hope, and of the power of humanity. And she would keep fighting not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. This was just the beginning. And she was ready.